Hey guys, just a quick one. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for showing so much support. We're almost at 5,000 subs, so please, if you haven't already, smash that sub button and let's show YouTube that we have the best story community. I love you guys.
I've always been a pretty chill person when it comes to dating apps. I mean, we all know how it goes. Swipe right, swipe left, maybe some awkward convos, maybe not. It's never been anything serious for me, just a way to kill time. But one day, I matched with this girl on Tinder. Her name was Anna. She seemed cool, we had a lot of mutual interests, and the conversation was easy. So I gave her my number, mistake number one. At first, everything was normal. We texted back and forth about movies, music, random stuff, you know the deal. But then things started getting a little weird. One morning, I got a message from her that just said, "Saw you at the grocery store last night. Nice choice with the avocados." I laughed it off at first. Sure, it was odd that she was at the same store, but it didn't seem like anything to worry about. Maybe she had been there at the same time, or it was just a coincidence. But then, a few days later, I was out walking my dog, and I got another message. "You were just down the street from me with your dog. I saw you walk by. That park looks nice, doesn't it?" Okay, now I was a little freaked out. How did she know what park I was at? I checked the weather app, because I thought maybe I had accidentally shared my location or something, but there was no indication I had. I asked her about it, trying to play it off casually, and she responded, "Don't worry, I'm just keeping an eye on things. I'd like to know what you're up to." That was when my stomach dropped. I didn't respond, and I blocked her on Tinder. Problem solved, right? Wrong. The next day, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of me walking into my favorite coffee shop. I hadn't told her where I was going, and I definitely didn't mention that coffee shop. It was at that moment that I realized something was seriously off. My heart started racing. I tried to ignore it, but as the days went by, the photos kept coming. Every time I went out, no matter what I was doing, grocery shopping, walking my dog, getting coffee, she'd send me a picture of myself. At first, it was just creepy, but I tried to tell myself it was some weird coincidence. Maybe she was just following me around accidentally. But then the videos started. One night, I was walking to my car after work, and I received a video. It was shaky at first, but then the camera focused on me as I unlocked my car door. It was a brief clip, but there was no mistaking that it was me walking toward my car in the parking lot. "Caught you just in time," the message said. Now I was officially scared. I locked my doors immediately and sped off, my mind racing. Who was this? How did they know where I was? And why the hell were they following me? The next day, I stayed home from work, deciding to just lay low. I wanted to feel safe for at least one day. But that night, I came home from the store, and as I was walking to my front door, I got another message. It was a picture of my front porch. The porch light was on, and I could see the shadows of my plants in the window. I stared at it for what felt like forever. My apartment was locked, and I hadn't seen anyone around when I came home. Then came the text that pushed me to my breaking point. "I've been waiting for you to come home. You look nice when you're smiling, just so you know." I felt sick. How did they know that? How had they been watching me for so long? The whole idea that someone had been following me, watching me from outside, was too much. I immediately called my best friend and told him everything. He suggested I call the cops, but I wasn't sure what to say. A stranger on Tinder is sending me creepy messages and pictures. It didn't seem like enough to warrant their involvement. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I changed all my passwords, logged out of everything, and started being more careful about where I went. But that didn't help. The texts kept coming. One morning, I woke up to another video. It was from inside my apartment. The camera was shaky, but the voice was crystal clear. "Good morning. I saw you smile when you checked your phone this morning." My stomach churned. There was no way she could have gotten in. The door was locked, and I would have noticed if anything was off. I spent the rest of the day checking every window, every door, every corner of my apartment for signs of a break-in. Nothing. The following night, I decided I couldn't stay in my apartment anymore. I packed up some things and stayed at my friend's place for a few days, hoping it would give me some peace of mind. But even there, I couldn't escape. I kept getting texts, photos of me walking around the city, of me in the park, of me driving on the highway. The person was everywhere. I kept blocking her number, but the texts never stopped. Each time I blocked one, I'd get a new number. Each time the messages got worse, more personal, more invasive. "I know your favorite seat at work." I know where you go for lunch every day. It didn't end. No matter how many times I blocked her, no matter how many times I changed my number, she always found a way to get in touch. It was like she was everywhere. And just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, it did. One night, while I was sitting at my friend's house, I received a new text from an unfamiliar number. The message was simple. I'm in your living room right now. You're not home, but I thought you'd like to know that I'm here. I froze. My heart stopped. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who this person was, how they were doing this, or what their end game was. But I knew one thing for sure. I was never going to feel safe again. So let me tell you about the time I thought I was going on a chill date with some nerdy guy I met on Tinder, and it turned out to be the weirdest and creepiest thing that's ever happened to me. Honestly, I wasn't expecting much. Just some coffee, maybe a couple of laughs, and if it didn't work out, at least I could say I tried. Spoiler alert, I ended up bolting out of there so fast I probably left a trail of dust behind me. His name was Harold. And when I say he was nerdy, I don't mean the cute kind of nerdy. I mean the kind of nerdy that makes you question how someone like that even gets a date. But hey, I'm not picky, and I figure I'd give him a shot. He seemed sweet enough in the messages, a little socially awkward, but honestly, that was fine. I didn't expect fireworks or anything. We decided to meet at Costa. Nothing fancy, just a casual meetup. I showed it a little early, and when I saw him walk in, I knew I'd made a mistake. Harold was wearing this ill-fitting sweater that looked like it hadn't seen a washing machine in years. His hair was combed back in this way that made it seem like he tried to look neat, but it just didn't quite work. He looked like a guy who spent too much time playing video games and not enough time looking in a mirror. But whatever, we're all a little odd, right? He walked over to me, gave me this awkward half smile, and sat down. We chatted for a bit, the usual stuff, work, hobbies, random small talk. The conversation was fine, though I could tell he was a little off. He kept making these weird long pauses when he spoke, like he was trying to think of something to say, but nothing really came out right. I didn't really mind, though. I was trying to be nice. Maybe it would get better as we went on. Then he did something that threw me off. He asked me what I wanted to drink, and I just said I'd go for a hot chocolate. I mean, it's not like I was in the mood for coffee. A hot chocolate seemed like a safe, non-committal choice. When he came back with the drinks, he handed me mine with this weird, almost overly proud smile, like he just solved some complex equation by picking out the exact right drink for me. I thanked him, but it was getting a little strange now. He kept glancing at me while sipping his own drink like he was studying my reactions. But then it got weirder. At some point, he leaned in just a little too close, and before I could even move back, his arm snaked around my shoulder. I didn't know what to do. I mean, he wasn't exactly being rude, but it felt off. I could feel his fingers pressing into my skin a little too hard as his hand shifted and landed on my neck. I tried to stay calm, telling myself it was just some awkward first date move, but the whole thing felt wrong. Then he did something that I can't forget no matter how hard I try. I felt his fingers slide down my neck, and then they drifted to my back. At first, I thought maybe he was just trying to be affectionate in some weird way, but as his hand moved lower, I realized what he was doing. He was scratching something on my back. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to freeze, wanted to yell, but I couldn't even process what was happening. I thought maybe he just didn't know boundaries. Maybe he was socially clueless, but then I realized it wasn't just scratching. He was focused on something, really digging his fingers into my back like he was trying to pick something off of me. It didn't take long for me to realize what it was. A scab. He was scratching at a scab on my back like it was some kind of weird obsession. I felt grossed out, but I didn't know how to react. I'm not someone who likes confrontation, and part of me thought maybe I was just overreacting. But then I saw the way his fingers pressed harder, how he kept digging and pulling at the skin like he was more focused on that than anything else. His eyes weren't even on me anymore. They were fixated on that little spot on my back. That was when I knew I had to get out of there. I don't even know how I managed to stand up without completely freaking out. I just told him I needed to go, made some excuse about work, and got up fast. But it didn't feel like enough. The whole time I was walking away, I could feel his gaze burning into my back. It was like he was watching me leave, studying my every move. I didn't look back, but I could feel his presence behind me like he was right there, waiting for me to turn around. As soon as I got outside, I did the one thing I knew would help me feel better, called my best friend. I didn't even tell her everything right away, just that I'd had a really uncomfortable date. She could tell I was upset, though, and I'm sure she could hear the panic in my voice. I stayed outside for a while, pacing around until I calmed down enough to get in my car and drive home. When I got home, I locked all the doors and windows, checked everything twice, and still felt like someone was watching me. I couldn't shake the feeling that Harold wasn't just some awkward guy. He was something else. I know I shouldn't have agreed to meet him in the first place, but I really thought he was just a little socially awkward, not someone who would scratch at my skin on a first date. I didn't hear from him after that night, and honestly, I didn't care. I blocked him on everything. Tinder, Instagram, my phone. I wasn't about to risk him showing up at my place or worse, stalking me. The whole thing made me realize how careful you have to be about who you meet online. Not everyone is who they say they are. Sometimes people have these weird, unsettling habits that you can't predict. In the end, Harold was just another creepy date gone wrong, but it's one I'll never forget. It all started pretty normal, like any other Tinder interaction. I matched with this guy named Josh, and honestly, he seemed like a decent guy. He was charming in a way that made me think he was a little nerdy, but not in a bad way. Just a chill, easygoing kind of guy. We'd been chatting for a couple of weeks, nothing too crazy, but there was something about him that just felt off. It wasn't anything I could put my finger on, just a weird gut feeling that I ignored because, honestly, I wanted to have some fun. We didn't meet up right away. He kept asking if I wanted to grab coffee or go to a movie, but life was busy and I kept making excuses. Finally, after some back and forth, we agreed to hang out at my place. I figured it would be better to meet in a comfortable setting, especially since we were both a little awkward with the whole dating app thing. We made plans for him to come over one evening to watch a movie and just chill. Nothing fancy, no big expectations. That day came, and I was a bit nervous but mostly excited to meet him in person. I tidied up my apartment, threw on some casual clothes, and made sure to prep snacks and drinks. Just a relaxed vibe. My best friend Emma was over at my place that evening, so I figured she could meet Josh too, just to keep things light. We were sitting in the living room, laughing and chatting, waiting for him to show up. When he arrived, it was a little awkward at first, but after a few minutes of small talk, we were all hanging out, watching a movie, and sipping on some wine. Josh didn't really talk much. He seemed more into observing us, like he was studying the way I spoke, the way Emma and I interacted. It wasn't that weird, but it was definitely noticeable. After a while, Emma had to leave for something, so it was just me and Josh chilling on the couch. We kept chatting about random things, work, music, life. I was relaxed, but for some reason I couldn't shake the feeling that something was just wrong. He kept leaning in a little too close, smiling a little too much, but every time I looked at him, he'd look away like he was trying not to get caught. Maybe I was just overthinking it. He was probably just shy, right? That night ended pretty uneventfully. He left around midnight, thanked me for a good time, and told me he'd like to do it again sometime. I said sure, but I wasn't really feeling it. Something about him just didn't sit right with me. I wasn't rude or anything, but I could tell we weren't going to be a perfect match. So I deleted the app and forgot about it for a while. Then about a week later, I got a message from an unknown number. I didn't think much of it at first. It could have been anyone. But when I opened the message, I froze. It was a voice memo. I clicked on it, and at first I thought it was just Josh sending some random voice note. But then I heard something that made my blood run cold. The voice wasn't just talking to me, it was recording me. I recognized the sound of my own voice, but it wasn't from the date, it was from earlier that evening. The voice clip started with me laughing about something Emma had said, then it went on with me talking about work, and some other random things we were discussing in the living room. The most disturbing part. The clip was crystal clear. It was like he had been in the room with us listening to everything. I could hear the slight background noise of Emma and I talking, the rustling of the couch cushions as we shifted around. I couldn't process what was happening. How could he have been recording me? I didn't even know how to react. My heart started racing as I clicked through the message, trying to figure out what was going on. Then the text came. It read, "Nice conversation you had. Wish I could have joined in. I'll see you soon." My head was spinning. I didn't know what to think. This guy, Josh, had somehow been in my living room recording me and Emma as we spoke. The door had been locked the whole time. The windows were shut. How was that even possible? I quickly checked the security cameras I'd installed around my apartment because, I've always been a little paranoid. The footage from earlier that evening was there. The front door was locked. No one had entered or exited. And still that voice memo existed. I felt sick to my stomach. How did he even do it? Did he have some kind of technology that could tap into my devices? Was he spying on me through my phone? I didn't know, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he'd been watching me, waiting for the right moment to mess with my head. The next few hours were a blur. I locked everything down, changed my passwords, and even called a tech guy to check my phone for any weird apps or spy software. Nothing came up. Everything seemed fine, but deep down I knew something wasn't right. That voice memo, his weird messages, the way he had acted that night, it was all connected, and I didn't know how to get out of it. I tried to reach out to my friends and family, but no one seemed to understand the severity of it. Oh, it's probably just a weird prank, they'd say. Maybe you're just creepy, but you're fine. But I didn't feel fine. I felt like I was being stalked, like there was someone out there who knew everything about me. And worse, someone who was deliberately trying to mess with my mind. The texts kept coming. I couldn't block in fast enough. Every time I deleted one number, he'd text me from another. It felt like he was always just one step ahead of me. His messages were always unsettling. He'd send random photos, nothing overtly dangerous, but they always made me feel like I was being watched. Eventually, I moved to a different apartment. I didn't tell anyone why, though. How do you explain something like that without sounding insane? I changed all my numbers, got a new phone, and stopped using social media for a while. But even now, months later, I still can't shake that feeling. What really bothers me, the fact that I still don't know how he did it. How did he record my conversation? How did he get access to my life without me even knowing? To this day, I'm still not sure if I'll ever really feel safe again. All I know is that I'll never forget that voice memo. Never. It started out like any other Tinder date. His name was Sam, and on paper, he seemed pretty normal. We had a few things in common, mutual interests, similar senses of humor. We'd been texting for a couple of days before deciding to meet up for coffee. Nothing extravagant, just casual. He was a bit quirky in person, but nothing that raised alarms at first. We talked about our jobs, movies we liked, that sort of thing. The usual small talk. I remember feeling comfortable enough, but not excited. He seemed nice enough, but something about him was a little off. Not in a major way, just weirdly attentive. Almost like he was trying too hard to engage. But I let it slide. Over the next few days, we messaged back and forth. Nothing crazy, just chatting here and there. I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep things going with him, but I wasn't feeling any red flags either. So I kept it friendly. But then things started to take a strange turn. It started on Instagram. At first, it was a like here comment there. Nothing unusual. But then, out of nowhere, Sam commented on a post I made from years ago, when I was maybe 12. A photo of my childhood home. Nothing special, just a picture of the house from a family vacation we took. It was posted back when Facebook was first starting to become popular, and I had barely any followers. It was one of those photos I barely even remembered putting up. At first, I thought, okay, maybe he's just scrolling through my feed. But then, a few minutes later, he commented again, this time on a photo I posted from my high school graduation. It was a candid shot with some of my closest friends at the time, something I'd completely forgotten about. It wasn't even a great photo, just a blurry moment. But the weird part, Sam didn't just comment. He referenced something in the caption. A private joke I'd made with a friend about our favorite teacher in high school, a joke that wasn't even in the post itself, but had been part of the conversation when the photo was taken. How did he know that? The more I thought about it, the more it sent a chill down my spine. I brushed it off, thinking maybe he was just trying to connect or something. But then it escalated. Over the next few days, Sam's comments got stranger. He started referencing personal details I had shared on social media, but not in the usual way. Not things I had recently posted or that were easy to find. He dug into the old posts, the stuff I hadn't even thought about in years. He commented on a post I made about my childhood toy, a stuffed animal I had for as long as I could remember, one I had mentioned in passing during a conversation on Twitter when I was in college. I'd barely even remembered posting about it. The worst part, he didn't just mention it. He described it. He said, "It must have been comforting to have that little bear with you all those years. It must have been like a best friend to you when you were younger." How did he even know I had that bear? I hadn't posted anything about it in years. It wasn't something I had talked about recently. How did he know that specific detail? I went back through my social media paranoid, scrolling through old posts, deleting anything that could give him another piece of my life to comment on. I was starting to feel like I was in a twisted game I didn't sign up for. It wasn't just about the photos anymore. He was piecing together details from my life, things that weren't public, things I had shared only in passing with a few close people. It felt invasive, like he had dug through every inch of my online history, looking for anything that could make me feel uncomfortable. By then, I was definitely freaked out, but I tried to ignore it. I told myself maybe it was just a coincidence, that he was being overly interested but in an odd way, and I convinced myself I was overreacting. Then came the message. I was sitting in my car one evening, checking my phone, when I saw a new message from Sam. I'd been thinking of blocking him, but hadn't done it yet. I opened it, expecting the usual casual comment or something about meeting up again, but this message was different. It read, "I've been thinking about you a lot lately. You never mentioned that picture of you and your dad from your trip to Florida. I bet you didn't even remember posting it, did you?" I froze. My dad and I had gone on that trip when I was in high school. The picture was from a vacation we took when I was 17, one I rarely post about. I hadn't even thought about it in years. I hadn't mentioned it to anyone recently, not even my closest friends. How did he know about that picture? It wasn't anything special, just a photo of me and my dad standing on a beach, looking at the camera awkwardly. There were no tags, no captions, nothing that stood out about it. The only people who would have remembered it were my dad and me, and maybe my mom. And yet here Sam was, referencing it like he knew everything, like he had been combing through every little thing I'd ever posted on the internet, picking out the most random, intimate details to piece together a story. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he had just stumbled upon the post. Maybe he was just a super detective who knew how to find old content on social media. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the case. He wasn't just stumbling on these things. He was seeking them out. I blocked him immediately and deleted my social media apps. But the damage had already been done. The thought of how much he knew about me, how much he had dug into my past, haunted me. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, watching, waiting for the next moment to slip into my life, piece by piece. The worst part, a part of me still wonders if he knows more than I'm aware of. If he's out there collecting even more random bits of my history that I thought were varied. Because now I don't think it's about being creepy. It's about control. He wants to be in my head, and it's working. Even though I blocked him, I can't help but check the past posts, the old pictures. I can't stop feeling like he's out there, waiting for his next comment, his next message, ready to make me feel like I'm not alone in the room. And the more I think about it, the more I realize he's already gotten inside my head. Okay, I matched with this guy on the good old Tinder, Adam. He seemed great, honestly. Super funny, shared a lot of the same interests as me, and our conversations flowed easily. We talked nonstop for about a week, and I started getting excited to finally meet up in person. I was definitely feeling the vibe. He was clever, charming, and had that sort of sense of humor that could make any awkward silence vanish. We decided to meet at this low coffee shop downtown. I'd been there a few times before, so it felt like a casual, low-pressure spot for a first meeting. I was excited, but also a little nervous. Meeting someone online always has that weird feeling of uncertainty. Will they be as cute as their pictures? Will the conversation be awkward in person? But Adam seemed promising, so I wasn't too worried. I got there a little early, grabbed a table by the window, and pulled out my phone to check through some messages while I waited. It wasn't long before I saw him walk in. I stood up to greet him, but as soon as he walked up to me, something felt off. I mean, he looked like the pictures he'd posted, but there was this strange familiarity in his eyes, almost like he knew me already. "Hey," he said, and then immediately sat down across from me without waiting for me to offer him a seat. That was my first red flag. But whatever, maybe it was just how he was. No big deal, right? I smiled and started chatting, but as we went on, things started to get weirder. He was bringing up random details about my life that I hadn't mentioned before. It wasn't like he was asking about my job or what I did for fun. No, he was talking about things that felt way too personal. "So, how's your old job at the bakery? That was a fun gig, huh?" He said, taking a sip of his coffee. My face must have shown how confused I was because he quickly added, I know, you probably didn't mention it yet, but I remember you telling me about it a while back." But that was the thing. I'd never told him anything about a bakery job. Sure, I worked in a cafe at one point, But that had been years ago, and I hadn't posted about it anywhere online. I didn't even mention it in our conversations. How did he know about that? It wasn't like something I talked about all the time. And then it just kept happening. He brought up a trip I took a few years ago to New Orleans, a place I went with my best friend. I'd never posted pictures from that trip online, and I hadn't shared the details with anyone except for a handful of close friends. But somehow Adam knew about it. "You had the best time there, didn't you? You looked so happy on Bourbon Street that night," he said, his tone casual like we'd talked about it before. But we hadn't. I'd never mentioned it, not to him, not to anyone I could remember. I was starting to panic. I thought I must have said something in passing, but my mind was racing. How could he possibly know all these things? Was he stalking me? And then the kicker. He casually dropped the name of my childhood dog. "By the way, I saw some pictures of you with Rex the other day. He's still as cute as ever." Rex was my dog growing up, the one I had until I was 18. I hadn't mentioned him to anyone in years, not even on social media. My family still talked about him, but I never brought it up with anyone else. There was no way Adam should have known about Rex. No way. At this point, I was so freaked out, I almost stood up and left. But instead, I tried to play it cool. I laughed and said something about how I must have shared too much with him without realizing it. Adam just smiled back like he wasn't worried at all. "I do my research," he said, leaning back in his chair, eyes twinkling. "I find it makes the conversation easier, helps me connect better." I felt the blood drain from my face. Research. What the hell was he talking about? How was he getting this information? Was he snooping around my social media? My thoughts were racing, but I tried to keep it together. I kept the conversation going, but I could feel unease building in my stomach. I made an excuse to leave shortly after, saying I had to get to an appointment. Adam smiled like it was no big deal, and I got out of there as fast as I could. As I walked to my car, I could feel my phone buzz in my pocket. It was a text from Adam. "You looked really cute while you were texting in the cafe," it read. "Don't worry, I wasn't stalking you or anything, just a little curious." That was it. I had enough. I blocked him immediately, feeling a wave of relief. I didn't want to deal with whatever was going on in his head. But the next day, things got worse. I got a notification from my phone. It was a text from an unknown number. "I was just walking by your street," that said. "You looked really cute walking around yesterday. I thought I'd snap a quick picture of your place while I was there." The text came with a photo of my apartment building. It wasn't a great photo, just the side of the building, but it was unmistakable. It was my building. I didn't even respond. I blocked the number and deleted everything, hoping it was just some sick joke. But then it happened again. Another number, another photo of my street. He was using burner accounts and somehow he was tracking me. Just thought I'd say hi while I walked by. One text read. Another said, "You looked cute in your window this morning." It felt like I couldn't escape him. No matter how many numbers I blocked, no matter how many accounts I reported, he kept finding ways to get to me. Each message made me feel smaller, more paranoid. I couldn't tell anyone about it because I knew they wouldn't believe me. I thought about moving, about changing everything, my number, my address, everything, but I knew that wasn't going to solve it. Adam had gotten into my head in a way I couldn't explain, and I couldn't ignore that he was always going to be watching, always going to know where I was. I've been careful ever since, and I still get random texts sometimes, but I'd never matched with anyone on Tinder again. I couldn't bring myself to trust anyone after that. It all started out like any other Tinder match, honestly. His name was Liam, and I was kind of into it at first. His profile was funny, full of memes and witty one-liners. He seemed like that kind of guy who'd be fun to hang out with. A little sarcastic, but in a cute way. He messaged me first, and I figured, why not give it a shot? Everyone likes a good joke, right? For the first few days, it was all lighthearted. We traded memes, sent random thoughts, and talked about the usual stuff. Movies, music, how the weather was ridiculously hot, that kind of thing. He made me laugh, and I was starting to feel like he might actually be a cool guy. Maybe I'd even started looking forward to our chats. But then the messages started to get a little off. It wasn't anything huge at first, just small things that I brushed off as a bad joke or something. Like, I posted a picture on Instagram of me out with some friends, and Liam texted me right after saying, "I saw you were out at the bar last night. Looks like you had fun. Hope it wasn't with anyone I know." Okay, and that felt a little weird. I mean, how did he know where I was? I hadn't told him, and I didn't even think he followed me on Instagram. But again, maybe he was just guessing or being sarcastic. People say weird things all the time, right? So I didn't think much of it. But the weirdness didn't stop. It got worse. Slowly, those passive-aggressive comments turned into something darker. The next day, I woke up to a message from Liam that said, "I can see you're still awake. It's 2 a.m. Why aren't you sleeping?" Now this freaked me out. I hadn't even been texting him at that time. I'd just gotten into bed, thinking about going to sleep. How did he know I was still awake? Maybe it was just a coincidence, but something about it gave me a bad feeling. I ignored it at first, hoping it was just him being his weird self. But then things kept happening. He would text me at random times, commenting on things I was doing. I went to work one morning, and before I even left my building, I got a text saying, "Going to work early today. You must really like your job." I froze. I didn't tell him I was going to work that early, let alone what time I even left in the mornings. It wasn't a public thing. He had no way of knowing that unless he had been watching me. It wasn't like I had posted anything about my schedule either. And then it got worse. The messages started coming when I was doing more personal things, like visiting my friends or running errands. One night, I was out having dinner with my best friend at this little Italian place we liked, and I got a message from Liam saying, "So, how's dinner with Sarah? Hope you two are catching up well." I couldn't breathe. I hadn't posted about my plans, and there was no way Liam could have known I was out with Sarah unless he had been, well, following me. The more I thought about it, the more paranoid I got. But every time I tried to confront him, he laughed it off. It was always the same response. Just a little game I'm playing. A game? My stomach dropped. This wasn't funny anymore. It felt like I was being stalked, like he was out there watching my every move and just pretending it was some kind of harmless joke. I tried to ignore it, lock in for a while, but the next day, he texted me again from another number. "Good morning. I hope you had a nice walk today." It was 9 a.m., and I had just taken a walk in the park. I hadn't told anyone I was going, not even Sarah. My skin was crawling. At this point, I started freaking out. I was constantly on edge, thinking I saw him out there whenever I went outside. But nothing could prepare me for what came next. One night, I was just relaxing at home watching TV, trying to forget about the weirdness of it all, and then I heard my phone buzz. It was Liam again. "Nice view from your window tonight," it said. "I can see the lights on in your apartment from down here." I felt like I couldn't breathe. I grabbed my phone and opened the message, only to find a picture attached. The photo was taken from the street below, showing my apartment building. I recognized the angle instantly. It was taken from a spot where you could only see the front of my place if you were standing outside of the corner. He was watching me. I could barely even think at that point. My hands were shaking and my mind was racing. I tried calling Sarah, but my phone wasn't even connecting. I couldn't even get the words out when I tried to explain what was going on. How had he been tracking me? Why was he doing this? I blocked him again and turned off my phone. I figured that would be it. I couldn't handle any more of this, but it wasn't over. The next morning, I woke up to several more messages from different numbers. They were all the same thing. Just wanted to say hi. I was walking by again. Each one included another picture of my street, my building, my apartment. I was terrified. I couldn't sleep. I didn't feel safe in my own home anymore. I ended up moving out a few weeks later. I couldn't stay there any longer. Every time I went to work, every time I went to the store, I felt like I was being watched. The police said they couldn't really do anything unless Liam showed up in person or made a physical threat, but it didn't feel like they took me seriously. They told me it was just a bad situation and suggested I change my phone number and social media accounts. But changing everything didn't make it feel any better. I don't know how Liam found out so much about me or how long he'd been watching me. Maybe he'd been doing this to other people too. I'll never know, but I don't use Tinder anymore. I don't trust people online. And even though I moved away, sometimes I still feel like someone's out there just waiting to make contact again. I had no idea what I was getting myself into when I matched with Zane on Tinder. At first, he seemed like a dream. He was funny, quick-witted, and we seemed to have a lot in common. We shared similar tastes in music, movies, and books, and I loved how he actually took the time to have real conversations. I mean, I'm not one for small talk, so when someone genuinely seemed to care about what I liked, it felt kind of refreshing. It started out like any other Tinder match. A few casual messages, some banter, you know how it goes, but pretty quickly, Zane's messages started getting more specific, like way too specific. For example, after a few days, he started talking about this band I mentioned liking once in passing. I thought, okay, cool, maybe he knows them too. But then it started to feel like he knew me. Hey, have you heard that track from One Direction? You mentioned it a while back, right? I bet you'd love it if you haven't heard it yet. The thing was, I hadn't mentioned that band in a long time, probably months, and I definitely didn't mention it to him. He kept going, almost like he was trying to show me that he understood me in a way that felt strange. He sent me links to articles I had read years ago, random indie movie recommendations I'd watched back in college, and even memes that matched my exact sense of humor. I thought it was a bit much, but at the same time, it was flattering. He was really paying attention. But after a while, it got weird. I started noticing things that didn't sit right with me. Like, he would reference small details I never told him. I had posted about a concert I went to back in 2018 on my social media, and somehow, Zane brought it up out of nowhere. I hadn't talked to him about it at all. He even asked, when you mentioned you went to that concert, was it really as amazing as you said it was? I didn't know what to say. How did he know about that? I had mentioned it once in passing to a friend, but I never posted about it publicly. When I asked him, how do you know about that? He just brushed it off with something vague like, I just remember you telling me about it before. Must have been a great experience. It didn't seem too creepy, but it did start to bother me a little. I let it slide though, thinking maybe I was just overthinking things. But then the texts kept coming, and coming, and coming. Sometimes he would send me messages at 2 a.m., talking about something I'd mentioned earlier in the day. Things like, oh, I saw that you tweeted about that movie. I really loved that one too. I hadn't tweeted about it. I hadn't even mentioned it to him. I started feeling like I was going crazy. Was I somehow forgetting things I had said? Was I talking to him more than I thought? Maybe he was just really good at guessing. Then one night, I went to bed like usual. I had a movie planned that I was really looking forward to watching. I didn't tell Zane about it. He didn't know what I was doing. I never mentioned the movie to him. But the next morning, I woke up to a message from him. I'm so glad you enjoyed that movie last night. I love how you feel about it. You always make the best choices. I wish I could have been there with you. My blood ran cold. He was talking about the movie I had watched the night before. But here's the thing, I hadn't told him I was even watching it. I hadn't posted anything about it. I never mentioned it at all. I tried to brush it off as a coincidence, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he somehow knew more than he should have. The messages started getting worse. Zane didn't just text me about my music taste or my movie habits. Now he was referencing specific moments in my life that only people who knew me well would understand. He asked about friends I hadn't mentioned, family events I hadn't posted about. One night, he sent me a picture of a book I had been talking about with a friend a week ago, claiming, I saw this and thought of you. You probably love it. I hadn't even posted about that book. I didn't know how he knew I was talking about it. It was like he was watching me. Every conversation, every tweet, every time I casually mentioned something, he seemed to latch onto it. And it didn't stop. The more I tried to back away, the more he pushed. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I told him I needed space. I didn't want to continue the conversation, but he didn't back off. Instead, he ramped up the intensity. I just want to be a part of your world, he'd say. I love everything you love. We get along so well if we just spent some time together. The most unsettling part. He never said anything directly threatening. He didn't need to. His constant, overwhelming presence felt more like a threat than anything explicit. It wasn't just that he knew what I liked. It was that he knew me. Or at least it felt like he did. I blocked him thinking that would solve the problem. But then the new numbers started coming. Texts and messages from random accounts, all saying the same thing. I just want to talk. I'm still here. It was as though he had a whole army of fake accounts just waiting to pounce. Every time I blocked him, he'd pop up again. And what's worse, he started sending me links to my own social media. Not just screenshots, but posts and photos I hadn't made public. Somehow, Zane had access to everything. I wasn't sure if he was tracking my movements or just obsessively digging into every corner of my life. Either way, he knew things that he shouldn't. At this point, I was terrified. I changed my phone number, locked my accounts down tighter than Fort Knox, and told my friends about what was happening. But Zane still found ways to sneak into my life, like a ghost that wouldn't go away. I don't know what Zane's endgame was. I never met him in person, and I don't want to. But the thought that someone could be watching, really watching, everything you do, it's enough to make you rethink how much you share online. If you ever get a message like mine, just know it's not flattery, it's obsession, and it's terrifying. I matched with Lee on Tinder about a week ago. I wasn't expecting much. I wasn't one of those people who thought I'd find the one on a dating app, but I was bored and figured it couldn't hurt to chat. She seemed cool, friendly, down to earth, and asked about my hobbies, the usual stuff. I liked her vibe, and after a few messages, we swapped numbers to move things off the app. She was easy to talk to, and we clicked pretty quickly. At least that's what I thought at first. The conversations were normal at first. She asked about my favorite movies, what kind of music I listened to, and if I had any interesting hobbies. I told her about my love for photography, how I spent my weekends exploring the city, taking random pictures of things that caught my eye. She seemed genuinely interested and even complimented my photos. It felt nice to get that kind of attention, to be honest. We'd all like a little praise now and then, right? Then it started to shift. Lee started asking for pictures. Nothing crazy, just selfies or photos of my surroundings. At first, I didn't think much of it. I mean, it wasn't like she was demanding anything out of the ordinary. I sent her a selfie from the park, one from a cafe I went to, and then a picture of my lunch one day because she asked. After that, though, she kept asking for more pictures. You looked great in that profile picture. Got any more like that? Or what about some shots from the beach you went to? I bet you look amazing there. I hesitated at first, but gave in and sent a couple more pictures. Just simple things like me standing by the water or holding a coffee cup. But after I sent those, it felt different. She started getting more specific, asking for more intimate shots, not in a way that felt normal anymore. It wasn't just about my face or my body anymore. It was about my life, where I was, what I was doing, what I was wearing. She started asking for pictures of the places I went to. Hey, send me a picture of your room, she texted once. Another time, send me a pic of your favorite shoes. It felt off, but I brushed it aside. Maybe she was just being curious. After all, she had shown interest in my life from the start. But things got weirder when I stopped sending her pictures. She didn't take it well. One night, I saw a message from her that made my stomach turn. I saw you at that cafe last week. You wore that cute shirt again. It looks great on you. She was talking about a shirt I wore 2 days ago when I went to grab coffee with a friend. But I never posted about it. I never mentioned it to her. I felt like something was wrong. I ignored the message at first, hoping it would blow over. But it didn't. The next day, she sent more pictures of me. These weren't pictures I had sent her either. They were screenshots from my Instagram, my Facebook, things I had posted months ago. I love how you look in this one. It's one of my favorites, she said about a picture of me at a concert I went to last summer. She had been digging through my social media, finding old pictures and sending them back to me with weird, obsessive comments. It freaked me out. How did she even know about those pictures? Some of them were from years ago. I didn't mention them to her. I had never talked about that concert with her. Yet there she was, referencing things I hadn't even thought about in forever. It wasn't just pictures anymore. She started commenting on everything I posted. Oh, I see you're working out today. Bet you're killing it at the gym. Or, you were at the bar last night. Looks like you had a good time. How did she know these things? I hadn't told her about any of them. I tried to brush it off as some kind of weird coincidence. Maybe she was just being over-friendly. But the messages kept coming. It got worse when she started texting me in real time. It's 3 p.m. and I know you're at work. How's the day going so far? Or, I can tell you just woke up. You always get up around 8, right? She was tracking my routine, and it felt like she was everywhere, watching every step I took. I blocked her, thinking that would be the end of it, but I couldn't have been more wrong. The next day, I got a text from a new number. It was her. I see you're online. Don't ignore me. I'm just looking out for you. I was horrified. How did she get a new number? How was she still contacting me? At that point, I was done. I blocked the new number too, but it wasn't over. The messages kept coming now from even more numbers from random accounts. Then, one day, I got a notification. Lee has tagged you in a post. It was a photo of my apartment building taken from across the street. I didn't know how she got that picture. I didn't even know where she'd taken it from, but I knew it was mine. I had never posted a picture of my building, yet there it was in the middle of her post. My heart dropped when I saw the caption. I know you live here. I've been watching you. Don't worry, I'll always be around. I haven't been on Tinder since. I don't know how she'd found me or why she was so obsessed with me, but I don't ever want to find out. I wish I could forget about her, but every time I go on social media, I wonder if she's still out there lurking. I'm constantly checking over my shoulder now, hoping I'm not being watched anymore. I'd always heard the horror stories about Tinder, but like most people, I thought they'd never happen to me. I'd matched with Daniel about 2 weeks ago, and things were going pretty well. We were both huge dog lovers, and we spent most of our conversations talking about our pups. He had a German Shepherd named Luke, and I had a poodle named Lily. I couldn't believe how much we had in common. We both loved going on walks with our dogs, and we even talked about taking them to the dog park together one day. Everything seemed normal, at least at first. One day, out of nowhere, Daniel sent me a link to a video of his dog Luke. It was kind of strange, but not in a bad way. Maybe he just wanted to share a cute moment with me. The thing is, when I clicked on the link, it didn't open up a regular video like I expected. Instead, it took me to a sign-up page that asked for my email address. I thought it was weird, but I figured maybe it was just a platform that required you to sign up to view content. So I put in my email. Nothing seemed suspicious about it at the time. I hit submit, but nothing happened. I thought maybe I made a mistake or the link was broken. I mentioned this to Daniel, but he didn't reply right away. In fact, he went silent, which was pretty odd. I figured he was busy or maybe something had come up, so I just went on my day. But then things started getting weird. That evening, I was scrolling through my phone when I got a notification, something that made my heart skip a beat. It was an alert saying my email had been signed out of my account. I frowned and opened up my email app to check, but when I tried to log back in, it said my password was incorrect. I knew I hadn't changed it, so I tried to reset it, but the reset email never came. It wasn't until I checked the forgot password section that I realized someone had already gone ahead and changed all of my details. The worst part, it wasn't just my email account that was locked. My bank details, my personal accounts, everything linked to that email was now vulnerable. Panic set in. I quickly tried to log into my bank app to see if anything had been compromised, but I couldn't get in. Every time I tried to log in, it just said that my password was wrong. That's when I realized what had happened. Daniel had somehow gotten access to everything. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I just handed him all of my personal information by signing up for that stupid link. I tried texting Daniel again, hoping for an explanation, but he never replied. He'd seen my messages, but still, he didn't say a word. I went into full panic mode trying to figure out what to do next. I called my bank, but they couldn't help me without verifying some details I couldn't access anymore. I couldn't get a hold of anyone that could help because all my contact information was tied to my email. Over the next couple of hours, I kept refreshing my inbox, hoping for a password reset email, but it never came. Then, as if to twist the knife further, I got another notification, this time from my bank app. Someone had tried to make a transfer. I was frozen, staring at my phone in disbelief. It was the kind of moment where you just feel your entire world start to crumble around you. I don't even know how to explain what happened next, but somehow I just knew. I knew Daniel had done something to my accounts. I remembered the link he'd sent me. It was all starting to make sense. That's when I realized that this was never about dogs or videos or whatever friendly, casual thing I thought it was. It was all a trap. He had somehow manipulated the situation to get access to my details, all because I trusted him enough to click on a link. By the time I realized the full extent of it, I felt so stupid for not noticing the signs earlier. I should have never clicked that link. I should have known something was off. But now it was too late. I spent the next few days on the phone with my bank, trying to get my accounts frozen and my personal information protected, but it felt like an uphill battle. Every time I tried to fix one thing, something else seemed to go wrong. At the same time, I kept checking my phone, hoping that Daniel would at least have the decency to explain what he had done. But he never did. He completely disappeared off the face of the earth. No response, no apology, nothing. It's as if I never mattered to him in the first place. I eventually had to take drastic measures. I changed every password to every account I had, set up two-factor authentication wherever I could, and completely wiped my phone to start fresh. I felt violated. Trusting someone on a dating app shouldn't lead to something like this, but here I was, fighting to piece my life back together. To this day, I don't know exactly how he did it. But looking back, I wish I'd never trusted him. The idea that someone could be that calculating over something as simple as a Tinder match is terrifying. I'd gone into this thinking I was just meeting someone new to chat with. Instead, I ended up with my personal details stolen and no one to blame but myself for trusting a complete stranger. I don't think I'll ever feel safe online again. Every time I get a new notification or sign up for a new service, I'm paranoid. I can't help but wonder if Daniel's still out there, watching, waiting for his next victim. I know that sounds dramatic, but after what happened, I'm not so sure. It's a lesson I'll never forget. Trust carefully, and when in doubt, don't click on links from strangers. This is a crazy crackle doo-doo. I'd never thought a Tinder date could go so wrong. It was supposed to be just a casual meet-up with Sandy, a girl I had matched with a week ago. We'd been texting for a while, and she seemed pretty normal, funny, easy to talk to, and shared a lot of the same interests as me. We had a decent amount in common, so when we decided to meet up for coffee, I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. The day started fine. We met at a little coffee shop in town. Nothing fancy, just a quiet place with a good atmosphere. She looked just like her pictures, maybe a little more smiley than I expected, but I guess that's always a good sign. We ordered our drinks, sat down, and started chatting like you do on a first date. At first, everything was normal. We laughed about some silly stuff, talked about our favorite movies, and joked about awkward first date experiences. But then, out of nowhere, she brought up something that made my stomach drop. She casually mentioned how she could easily frame someone for assault. I thought maybe it was a joke, or maybe she was just being a little edgy. But as the words left her mouth, I felt a chill down my spine. It was the way she said it, like she was totally serious. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe I was just misinterpreting things, but she kept going. She started talking about how she had friends who could help her set up situations if she needed to. I laughed nervously, unsure of how to respond. I thought maybe she was just testing the waters, trying to see how I'd react to something bizarre. But it wasn't stopping. It wasn't getting any less uncomfortable. As she spoke, I noticed her body language. She was leaning in too close, her eyes locked on mine like she was waiting for me to say something. I could feel her gaze, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. This was no longer a normal conversation. This felt like a warning. It's hard to explain why I felt so uneasy, but something in the way she was talking made me feel like I was in danger. It wasn't like the usual awkwardness you might feel when a date isn't going well. It was something deeper, something unsettling. Every time she spoke about it, her voice didn't change. It was calm, matter of fact, as if framing someone for assault was just something she could easily do on a whim. I started feeling trapped. I was sitting across from her, and the table felt like it was closing in. My mind raced, trying to come up with a way to get out of there without making things worse. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the fact that she seemed almost too confident about what she was saying. The worst part? I didn't know she was threatening me directly, or if this was some strange, twisted way of testing me. Either way, it wasn't something I could just shrug off. I tried changing the subject. Maybe if I shifted the conversation, it would break the tension. But every time I'd ask her about her hobbies or what she liked to do for fun, she'd steer back to how easy it is to make someone's life hell. She'd give examples of people she knew who had been caught up in situations they couldn't get out of, all of them starting with some minor interaction gone wrong. As she continued talking, I couldn't stop thinking that she was looking for some kind of reaction from me. I didn't know if she wanted me to be scared or if she just liked the power of knowing she could make someone feel uncomfortable. The longer she went on, the more I felt like I was trapped in a conversation I had no way out of. My gut was screaming at me to leave, but I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want to escalate things in case I was misreading the situation. But then it happened. She looked at me with this unsettling smirk and said, "You're lucky we're just having coffee. I could make you regret even being here, you know." My heart dropped into my stomach. That was it. I was done. I knew right then and there that I had to get out of this situation. I stood up abruptly, feeling the rush of panic flood my chest. My mind was racing, but I knew I couldn't stay any longer. I didn't even care about the coffee I had ordered or if I looked rude. My safety was the only thing on my mind. I grabbed my bag, paid for my drink, and walked out of the coffee shop as quickly as I could. Once I was outside, I didn't even know where to go. I just needed to get away from her. I didn't want to run into her again, and I sure as hell didn't want her to know where I lived or anything else about me. I didn't look back, but I kept thinking about how calm she had been, how it all felt like some twisted game to her. It was like I'd walked into some sort of trap without even realizing it. I spent the rest of the evening looking over my shoulder, waiting for some sign that she was going to show up, but thankfully nothing happened. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd narrowly escaped something much worse. I kept wondering how I could have been so blind to the warning signs earlier, and why she even brought it up in the first place. Looking back, the truth is I still don't know if she was bluffing or if she had a real intention to cause harm. Either way, I learned my lesson. It's easy to get swept up in the excitement of a new connection, but when something feels wrong, you need to trust your gut and get out. I don't know what could have happened if I had stayed, but I don't want to find out. Now, whenever I go on Tinder or any dating app, I remember that date. I think about Sandy and how I almost stayed in that situation out of politeness. It still haunts me how quickly things turned dark, how a normal date turned into a nightmare. And the worst part, I'll never know if she was just messing with me or if there was something more sinister behind her words. It all started with a Tinder swipe, like it always does. You know, the usual scrolling through endless profiles of people trying to look as cool as possible with their perfect smiles, beaches, and weirdly posed pictures. But then I came across Lily. Cute with dark hair and these cat ears. Yeah, cat ears. I thought it was a weird accessory, but something about it made me pause. It wasn't like any other girl I had seen on there. She wasn't trying too hard to be all influencer or whatever. I matched with her and we started chatting. At first, it was all normal stuff. She was funny, cool, nothing out of the ordinary. But the more we talked, the more I noticed she kept bringing up cats. Like, over and over again. She had a cat in every sentence. She asked if I liked cats, how many cats I had, and even which breed was my favorite. It felt a little off, but I didn't think too much of it. I mean, some people are just obsessed with stuff, right? After a few days of texting, Lily suggested we meet up. I wasn't sure at first, but I agreed. I mean, she seemed fun, and who doesn't like meeting new people? She gave me her address, and I'll admit I kind of got nervous. My mind started playing little tricks on me. What if she wasn't as cool in person? What if she wasn't really into me? Or worse, what if she was a complete weirdo? I brushed it off and told myself to just go for it. So I showed up at her apartment building. It was a little out of the way, tucked in a quieter part of the city. I thought that was kind of strange, but whatever, people have their own reasons for where they live. When I walked up to her door, I felt my heart beat a little faster. Was I about to meet a psycho? Probably not. But there was that tiny voice in the back of my head that kept saying asterisk what if, asterisk. I rang the doorbell, and within seconds, Lily opened the door. She was wearing the cat ears again, but this time she had a full-on cat-themed hoodie on, complete with little paw prints on the sleeves. The vibe was definitely asterisk off asterisk, but she was friendly, smiling like she was genuinely happy to see me. So I forced a smile and walked inside. Her apartment was, well, how do I put this? It was asterisk cat-themed asterisk, but not in a cute, I love cats kind of way. No, it was like someone took their love for cats and let it run wild in every room. The first thing I noticed was the cat-shaped welcome mat at the door, and then I saw the shelves, the posters, the figurines, even the cushions on the couch had little cat faces on them. It was as if she had gone out of her way to buy anything and everything that had a cat on it. But honestly, that wasn't even the weird part. She led me to the living room, which looked pretty normal except for the fact that it was asterisk covered asterisk in cat hair. I mean, it was everywhere. On the couch, the rug, even the walls looked like they had some kind of fuzz clinging to them. It wasn't like she just had one cat. It was like she was asterisk breeding asterisk them, and I wondered where the hell they all were. The weirdest part, there were little cat-shaped bowls on the floor. I thought it was for decoration, but nope, they were filled with actual food. Lily seemed like she was used to it all. She casually walked over to the couch, plopping down and patting the seat next to her. I sat down, trying to ignore the overwhelming presence of cat-themed everything. She made some small talk at first, asking if I had any pets, what I like to do for fun, basic stuff. But then she got a little more specific. She asked what I thought about people who, like, asterisk really asterisk love their cats. I was honestly taken aback, but answered, I mean, I guess it's fine as long as it's not too much. Big mistake. Lily's eyes lit up. I'm one of those people, she said, and I could hear a weird intensity in her voice. She looked at me with this look that made me feel strange, like I had just stepped into something way deeper than I was ready for. After a couple of awkward moments, Lily stood up and excused herself to grab something. I sat there trying to ignore the weird vibes, and that's when I noticed it. There in the corner of the living room was a litter box, a real honest-to-God litter box. I stared at it for a second, thinking I had to be imagining things. But no, there it was, right next to the couch. I figured maybe she had a cat who used it, right? But then Lily came back into the room and she had this strange look on her face, like she was proud of something. She went into the kitchen and came back with a tray of snacks, but before she handed them to me, she leaned in real close and whispered, "I want to show you something." I didn't know what to say. I thought she was maybe going to show me some weird cat videos or something, but no. Lily walked right over to the litter box, and without any hesitation, she squatted down next to it. At that moment, I felt like the room was closing in on me. Was she actually going to do what I thought she was going to do? Before I could even process it, she calmly pulled her pants down and went to the bathroom right there in front of me. I could feel my stomach drop as she just casually went about it, like it was the most normal thing in the world. I was frozen, unsure of what to do or say. But then she finished, stood up, and casually wiped herself with what looked like a towel meant for a cat. She didn't even seem embarrassed. She just smiled and said, "I hope you don't mind. It's just easier this way." That was it. I couldn't do it anymore. I had to leave. I got up, muttering some lame excuse about not feeling well, and bolted out of there, nearly tripping over myself. My head was spinning, and the whole situation felt like a bad dream. I haven't spoken to Lily since that night, and I don't plan on it. I don't care how cute or quirky someone seems online. Some things should just stay in the digital world. Some people just aren't what they seem. And trust me, you don't want to know what it's like when they are. So, here's the thing. Tinder's a weird place. You go on there, swipe left and right, and every now and then you get a match with someone who seems pretty cool, and sometimes, well, things get strange. This is one of those stories. It started with Tiffany. I swiped right on her profile mostly because she had a decent smile, and her bio was pretty chill. Just the usual, let's see where it goes. Nothing too deep, nothing that screamed crazy or anything like that. We matched, and she messaged me first, which was kind of refreshing. Her profile pics showed her in some nice outfits, smiling, looking all put together. But when we started chatting, she seemed a bit off. I can't really explain it. At first, I thought it was just me overthinking it, but the more we talked, the more I got this weird vibe. She kept talking about designer this and expensive that, always mentioning her jewelry collection and how she loved accessorizing. She seemed obsessed with it, like she couldn't go 5 minutes without talking about her rings, her necklaces, her bracelets. I thought it was strange, but didn't think much of it at first. I mean, people have their hobbies, right? She suggested meeting up, and I agreed. She told me to meet her at a cafe downtown. I remember getting there early and just sitting in the corner, checking my phone, kind of thinking maybe I should have bailed. I don't know what it was, but something about her was rubbing me the wrong way. And she walked in, and let me tell you, this girl was asterisk covered asterisk in jewelry. Every finger had multiple rings on it. Her wrists were stacked with bracelets, and she had a necklace that looked like it belonged in a museum. But it wasn't in a classy, elegant way. It was like she was wearing anything she could find just for the sake of it. And that's when I first thought, okay, maybe this is a little much. She sat down across from me, and I don't know, there was something unsettling about the whole thing. She was all smiles, super friendly, but she kept adjusting her rings, picking at her necklace, fiddling with everything. It was like she couldn't keep still, always had to be touching something, like her jewelry was the only thing grounding her. I remember looking around the cafe, and I swear I saw some people staring at her. Not in a wow, she looks great kind of way, but more like, whoa, is this girl for real? We talked for a bit, but it felt awkward. She mentioned random things about her jewelry collection, how she was in the market for a few more pieces. It didn't feel like a normal conversation. It was like she was constantly talking about herself and her stuff, and not even in a way that was fun. More like a flex. I couldn't focus on what she was saying because it was just one big weird flex after another. At some point, I realized I wasn't even really listening. I'd nod every now and then, but my head wasn't in it anymore. The whole vibe was off. She seemed like she was talking to me, but also like she was performing for an audience in her head, like she was constantly trying to impress someone, maybe even herself. The jewelry started getting to me more too. Every time she moved her hand, there was this constant jangling sound from all the rings and bracelets. It was like I couldn't escape the noise. And it wasn't just a few pieces of jewelry here and there, it was layers of it. I started feeling claustrophobic, like it was closing in on me. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't getting the usual this could be fun vibe I get when I meet someone new. It felt more like I was talking to a person who was obsessed with something completely different. It wasn't just a bad date. It felt asterisk wrong asterisk. I made an excuse to leave. I said I had to get back to work, and she was super understanding, but even as I was walking away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right about her. The whole time I was walking back to my car, I kept thinking about how weird the whole date was. I was glad I was done with it, but for some reason I couldn't stop thinking about her. So I did what anyone would do in this day and age. I Googled her. Yeah, I probably shouldn't have, but I was curious. Tiffany wasn't a super unique name, so I didn't expect much, but then I saw it. There was an article about a woman who was wanted for stealing jewelry from high-end stores. The description fit her almost perfectly. Tall, dark hair, heavy jewelry, everything matched. I clicked on the article, and as I read, the weirdest thing hit me. Tiffany was in the news for being part of a group of jewelry thieves who had been targeting wealthy areas. She wasn't just obsessed with jewelry, she was stealing it. The more I read, the more my stomach sank. She was wanted in connection with several robberies. The police were offering a reward for any information leading to her arrest. I felt a sickening feeling in my gut. It couldn't be the same Tiffany, could it? I mean, what were the chances? I tried to convince myself I was just jumping to conclusions. Maybe it was a coincidence. But then I remembered how weirdly obsessed she was with jewelry, how she was almost showing off like she was proud of it. Maybe she wasn't just talking about her collection. Maybe she was talking about her asterisk stash asterisk. My heart was racing. I couldn't believe I just met someone who could have been involved in something so shady. I mean, we didn't really talk about anything personal or deep, so I had no idea she was mixed up in something like this. But after reading that article, everything about her, her obsession with jewelry, the way she carried herself, suddenly clicked in a way that made my blood run cold. I haven't heard from her since that day, and I haven't reached out either. I don't know if I'll ever meet someone like that again, but to be honest, I hope I don't. After all, it's one thing to meet someone who's a little weird, but it's another thing to have a potential criminal sitting across from you at a cafe, pretending to be normal while she's probably involved in some crazy shit behind the scenes. I've been thinking about that day a lot, and I still get this uneasy feeling when I see a story about jewelry theft on the news. I can't help but wonder if Tiffany's out there still doing her thing, still covered in all those shiny, stolen trinkets. I don't even know where to start with this one. I guess you could say I've learned to never trust a guy who's too perfect on paper, but I didn't think that's what this was gonna turn into. This Tinder story definitely took a turn I didn't expect, and I swear I'll never look at dating apps the same way again. I matched with Jim one night. I remember being bored just scrolling through the usual profiles when his popped up. He had this perfect smile, and his bio wasn't anything crazy. It just said, looking for someone who can make me laugh and who's real. Don't play games. Basic, but the vibe felt genuine. I mean, we've all seen those people on dating apps that feel like they're just copy-pasting the same thing, but Jim didn't seem like that. He seemed different. And that was enough for me to swipe right. He messaged me first, and it was super chill, nothing too intense. Just asking what I was up to while I'd doing in my free time. Normal stuff. We talked for a few days, and I'll admit he was easy to talk to. He made me laugh a lot, and we started chatting about all kinds of things. Movies, food, random stories from our lives. Honestly, it felt like we were building a connection pretty fast, but in a way that wasn't rushed or forced. Everything felt natural, like we were just two people who clicked. After a week or so, we decided to meet up. He suggested a quiet little park in the city. It was kind of a hidden gem that wasn't too crowded, and it felt like a perfect first date spot. I was kind of excited, but also a little nervous because, well, that's how it always goes when you're meeting someone for the first time, right? I threw on some casual clothes, made sure I looked good enough, but didn't try too hard, and drove over. When I got there, I saw him sitting on a bench under a tree, looking exactly like his photos, tall, with this relaxed smile that seemed to put everyone around him at ease. He stood up when he saw me, and we greeted each other with a hug. It wasn't awkward at all, which was nice. He seemed just as chill in person as he had in the messages. We walked around the park, chatting about random stuff. I can't even remember exactly what we talked about at that point, because it felt like we were just enjoying each other's company. He told me a little bit about his job and his friends, and I told him about mine. Nothing deep, but I was enjoying the time we were spending together. The chemistry was there, and I could see us maybe doing this again. But then things started to shift. It was like a switch flipped. We were sitting on a bench overlooking the lake, and Jim just went completely quiet. I didn't think much of it at first. People get quiet sometimes, right? But then he looked at me with this expression that I hadn't seen before. It was like he was somewhere else mentally. I felt this weird tension in the air, and I started wondering if maybe I had said something wrong. Then, out of nowhere, he just blurted out that he didn't think this was going to work. I remember thinking, wait, what? Where is this coming from? I hadn't done anything to mess things up. At least I didn't think so. He kept talking, and it didn't make sense. He said he was really in love with his ex and that he had been trying to move on, but he couldn't. That he didn't want to leave me on. I sat there for a second, trying to process what he was saying. I felt like I was in some kind of weird dream. 1 minute we're laughing and having a good time, and the next, he's telling me that he can't be with me because he's still hung up on his ex. It made no sense. And then, even weirder. I thought he was going to say something more, but instead, he just started crying. Like full-on tears, not just a little sniffle. I've never been in a situation like that before, especially not with someone I barely knew. Jim, the guy who would have been so charming and funny just an hour ago, was now sitting in front of me, visibly upset, tearing up over his ex. It was uncomfortable, to say the least. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't equipped for this kind of thing, especially not on a first date. I was trying to figure out how to comfort him without making it worse, but everything felt off. He wasn't even really talking about us anymore. He was just going on about how much he missed his ex and how he thought he was ready to move on, but clearly wasn't. It was like he was telling me all this stuff about his ex as if I was just there to listen to him vent, but he wasn't even looking at me. At that point, I started to feel more like a therapist than someone he was interested in. I tried to get him to explain things like why he was even here if he was still so hung up on her, but nothing really made sense. It wasn't about me. It was all about his past, his ex, and the emotional baggage he wasn't ready to let go of. The more he cried, the more I started to feel like I was intruding on something way too personal. It just felt wrong. I wasn't sure how much time passed, but eventually Jim kind of calmed down. He apologized for crying and for making things so awkward, but at that point, I just wanted to leave. I could tell he wasn't in a place to start anything new, and honestly, I didn't want to be around while he was working through whatever emotional mess he had going on. So I made up some excuse about needing to get going, and he seemed to understand. He gave me a quick hug, told me he was sorry again, and then we parted ways. As I drove home, I just kept replaying the whole situation in my head. I felt bad for him, sure, but at the same time, I felt confused and a little frustrated. Why had he even asked me out if he was still so emotionally tied to his ex? It was like he wasn't even giving himself the chance to get over her, and he was dragging me into it too. A few days later, I saw him on social media. No, it wasn't a message or anything, but I saw one of his friends had posted a photo of him at a party, and he looked *find*, laughing, enjoying himself, not crying over his ex. It was like the whole emotional breakdown thing was just a moment that he brushed off and moved on from, while I was left sitting there feeling like I'd just been part of some weird emotional game. Looking back on it now, I realize that it's not just about dating someone who's emotionally available. It's about trusting your gut. My gut told me something was off from the start, and I didn't listen. But I guess it's better to figure out who someone really is sooner rather than later. I still can't quite figure out Jim's deal, but I learned something that night. People aren't always what they seem, and sometimes they just need to cry it out, even if it makes the rest of us feel incredibly awkward. Alright, so I'm still not sure if this is some kind of weird dream, or if I just managed to meet the most intense person on Tinder. Either way, what happened to me with Michael was bizarre to say the least. So, a little background. I'd been on Tinder for a while, mostly just swiping mindlessly when I was bored. You know, the usual chit-chat with some guys, maybe get a drink or two, but nothing ever really stuck. And then one day, I'd matched with Michael. He had these cute pics, super normal, nothing out of the ordinary. He looked like the kind of guy you'd run into at a coffee shop or a bookstore. No red flags in his profile. He was funny, a little sarcastic, and seemed pretty chill. We started talking, and everything was just fine. We joked around a bit, talked about our favorite movies, hobbies, the usual stuff. After a few days of chatting, he suggested meeting up. I agreed, and we picked a place. Nothing fancy, just a little bar near downtown. Low-key, which I liked. I remember walking into the bar and seeing him already there. He stood up when he saw me, smiled, and I could tell he was nice in person too. We grabbed drinks, talked about random things, and had a few laughs. The conversation was flowing, and I was feeling pretty good about how the night was going. He seemed normal, not pushy or anything, just a guy trying to get to know someone. But as the night went on, I started feeling like there was something a little asterisk off asterisk. It wasn't anything obvious, but it was like this weird undercurrent of intensity that kept growing as we talked. By the time we were halfway through our second drink, I started noticing how seriously asterisk he was looking at me. Like, not the usual casual glances, but almost like he was studying me. I was starting to feel a little uncomfortable. He'd ask about my family, my past relationships, things like that, pretty deep for a first date. But I shrugged it off. Maybe he was just trying to get to know me, right? At some point, he started talking about how he'd never felt this connection with anyone before. I nodded, unsure of what to say, but I thought maybe he was just being a little romantic or, overly dramatic. I didn't think much of it until he said he had something he needed to tell me. I didn't know what to expect, but I wasn't ready for what came next. He dropped the bomb. Asterisk had proposed asterisk. Like right there in the middle of the bar. It wasn't some playful, oh, wouldn't it be funny if we got married joke. He seriously started talking about how we were meant to be together and how he could already picture a future with me. At first, I thought he was joking, or maybe he had been drinking a bit too much. I mean, asterisk had been drinking, but nothing prepared me for that. I didn't know how to react. I thought maybe he's just being overly emotional, or maybe this was a weird way of making the date memorable. Like a strange attempt at being really forward and showing that he was serious. But no, it wasn't that. He kept going on about how he could see us having kids and living in a house together. He even talked about names for our future kids. I kid you not, he started listing baby names. Asterisk on the first date asterisk. I started looking around trying to figure out if this was some kind of prank or if people were watching us and waiting for the punchline. But nope. It was just me and Michael sitting in this bar, with him talking about our future asterisk. At this point, my mind was racing. Was he okay? Was this normal? I wasn't sure if I should laugh or walk out. It felt like a horror movie, but in real life. I remember trying to steer the conversation back to something less intense. Maybe something casual, just to break the tension. But nope, he wouldn't let up. It was like his mind was made up. He started getting more serious, saying things like, I know this seems fast, but sometimes you just no, you know. He was smiling, but his eyes, they were so intense, like there was this burning desire behind them. I couldn't look him in the eye for more than a few seconds. And then, of course, the waiter came over to check on us. He looked at Michael like he was nuts and gave me this sympathetic smile. It was obvious I wasn't having the best time, but I just nodded and pretended everything was fine. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. Finally, I excused myself to the bathroom, mainly because I needed a second to breathe. I'm not one to freak out easily, but this guy was throwing me off. I had no idea what was happening, but the whole situation felt wrong. I was starting to panic. I've been on bad dates before, but this one felt like a whole new level of uncomfortable. He was practically planning our life together when we just met. It wasn't just overwhelming, it was kind of terrifying. I didn't know what his intentions were, but they felt way too intense for someone I had just met. When I came back, I knew I had to end it. It was just too much. As I sat back down, he smiled at me like everything was fine, like he hadn't just said all that crazy stuff. I looked at him and took a deep breath, trying to keep it together. I told him I wasn't feeling the same way and that it was best if we didn't continue this. He got super quiet after that. He didn't yell or cause a scene, but you could tell he was disappointed, confused. I don't know. I guess he thought I'd be on board with his plan he had for us. But there was no way in hell I was going to agree to something like that. I told him I had to go and pay for my drink. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. He didn't try to stop me, which I was thankful for. I walked out of the bar, and the cool night air felt like a relief. I immediately called my friend and told her the whole story. She didn't believe me at first. She thought I was exaggerating. But nope, that night was real, and it was asterisk weird asterisk. It's been a few weeks since that date, and I haven't heard from him again. Honestly, I don't want to. The whole thing still gives me the creeps. I don't know what was going through Michael's head, but I definitely learned one thing. Some people move asterisk way asterisk too fast on dating apps. I mean, I thought Tinder was just for meeting new people, not getting a marriage proposal on the first date. Just beware of people who come on too strong. Some of them might have a different idea of what dating means. This might sound like something straight out of a horror movie, but I swear it's 100% real. Honestly, I'm still trying to wrap my head around the whole thing. I mean, I've heard about creepy Tinder dates before, but what happened with Tanya was on a whole different level. I've been on Tinder for a while, casually chatting with a few people, nothing serious. And then I matched with Tanya. At first glance, she seemed pretty normal, cute pictures, a decent bio that didn't scream, "I'm here to make your life miserable," and she seemed easygoing. We had some fun conversations about our favorite movies and stuff. Everything was pretty chill. A few days later, we decided to meet up. We went for coffee at a spot downtown, the kind of place with indie music playing in the background and mismatched chairs. Super casual. Honestly, she seemed like someone I could vibe with. She was sweet, funny, and we had a good time. We talked about random things, work, our hobbies, the usual stuff. The date wasn't weird, and I didn't feel any red flags going off. I left feeling like, hey, this might actually turn into something. But that's where everything started to go downhill. A few days later, I started noticing she was messaging me asterisk a lot, asterisk. Not in an overly clingy way at first, just checking in, asking how my day was going. It was fine, I thought. But then things started to escalate. She began asking about my family, which I thought was a bit much, but whatever, I brushed it off. She asked about my siblings, my parents, stuff I didn't usually talk about with someone I just met. But I didn't think it was a big deal. She was just trying to be sweet, right? The problem started when she started asking questions that didn't make sense. Like, she wanted to know what my mom did for work, how many cousins I had, and even where my parents went on vacation a few years ago. It felt like she was trying to build some kind of profile of my whole life. It was starting to creep me out, but I didn't know how to pull back without sounding rude. I didn't really think much about it until one night I got a call from my mom. Now, my mom is asterisk, not asterisk, the kind of person who calls me out of the blue, especially late at night, so I knew something was off. She sounded a little confused, like she was trying to figure something out. "Hey, honey, I just got this weird call from a girl named Tanya. Do you know her?" I remember just freezing. Tanya. How did my mom even get her number? I hadn't even mentioned Tanya to her, so how the hell did she know my mom's number? Apparently, Tanya had called my mom and asked a bunch of personal questions about me. Stuff like if I was a good son, if I was in a relationship, and what kind of guy I was. The conversation had been weird enough for my mom to actually be calling me to figure out who this person was. At that point, I was officially freaked out. I didn't know how Tanya had gotten my mom's number or why she thought it was okay to call her. It wasn't like she was asking for advice or anything. It felt like she was digging, trying to find out everything about me. I wasn't sure if she had crossed a line or if I was just overreacting, but I could feel the unease in my stomach. I tried texting Tanya to get some kind of explanation. I figured maybe she was just being overly curious, or maybe she'd gotten carried away with wanting to know more about me. But when I texted her, I didn't get an answer right away. That was odd because she usually responded quickly. I didn't know what to make of it, but my gut was telling me something wasn't right. A couple of days later, things got weirder. I woke up to a message from her on my phone, but it wasn't just a normal good morning text. It was a long paragraph about how she had been thinking about me and our future together. The thing is, we had only been talking for a few days, so why was she talking like we'd been in a relationship for months? I was starting to feel trapped, like I couldn't get out of this situation without causing a scene. But the weirdest part was yet to come. Later that afternoon, I got a call from my dad. Now, I know this is going to sound insane, but he told me Tanya had called him too. Yep. Tanya had reached out to my dad, asking about my childhood, what I liked to do growing up, and whether I was a responsible adult. I just couldn't believe it. How the hell had she gotten his number? What was going on here? By this point, I was officially freaked out. It was starting to feel like I was being stalked. She was calling my family, asking them personal questions about me like she was researching my entire life. It wasn't normal, and it wasn't okay. I felt like I was being suffocated, but I wasn't sure how to stop it without making things worse. The next time I heard from Tanya, she was even more intense. She started telling me that she knew we were meant to be together. She even mentioned our future kids' names and where we'd live. I could feel the anxiety creeping up my chest, like I was trapped in this nightmare I couldn't wake up from. How had everything gone from a chill coffee date to this? I started to distance myself, but it didn't matter. She was relentless. I eventually blocked her number, but it didn't stop there. She started following me on all my social media accounts, leaving comments on my posts, liking everything I uploaded. It was like she was everywhere, and I couldn't escape her. Every time I thought I had a moment of peace, she popped back up in some way. I couldn't even go out with friends without feeling like I was being watched. Eventually, I had to cut ties with everyone I knew. I blocked her on all social media, changed my phone number, and moved to a different city. It wasn't something I ever thought I'd have to do, but it felt like the only way to get away from Tanya. I still don't know what happened with her, and I don't want to know. All I know is that the whole situation left me shaken. It wasn't just a bad date, it was a nightmare. So yeah, if you ever meet someone on Tinder who's a little too into you, or who starts asking about your family after just one date, run asterisk, it's not worth it. I'm gonna tell you about this Tinder date that still has me side-eyeing my matches to this day. I can't even explain the weird vibes I got from this guy, Toby. It started like any other random date, but trust me, it did not end that way. I thought I was going on a chilled, normal date, but what I ended up getting was something I still can't wrap my head around. So let's back up a bit. I matched with Toby after swiping through the usual profiles. People looking for dates, hookups, or whatever. Toby's profile wasn't anything special, but it wasn't bad either. He had this kind of artsy vibe to him. His bio talked about how he was a writer, which honestly made him sound a little pretentious, but hey, I'm always up for meeting someone with a passion. So we started talking. The conversation was pretty normal at first. He asked me about my favorite books, movies, and all that typical getting to know you stuff. He even seemed pretty funny, which was a good sign. So we made plans to meet up at this coffee shop downtown. Nothing fancy, just a casual spot with good lads. When I met Toby in person, he didn't look like I expected. He was dressed in a hoodie and jeans, kind of laid back, but there was something off about him. He kept fidgeting, and his smile felt a little forced. Still, I didn't think much of it. I've met people who are nervous on first dates before. But then we sat down, and he started talking about his writing. And when I say talking, I mean talking. He couldn't stop going on about a novel he'd written, which sounded fine. People are proud of their work, I get it. But then it quickly became clear that he was way too invested in it. Like, way more than anyone should be talking about something on a first date. He told me that his novel was about an African American street smart guy. Okay, cool, I guess. I didn't think much of it at first, but then he kept going, explaining how he'd always been fascinated by people of different skin colors and cultures. I didn't know what to make of that. Who says something like that so casually? At first, I thought maybe he was trying to sound woke, like he was going for the "I'm really into diverse cultures" vibe. But it was just off. The way he said it felt uncomfortable, like it was his way of showing that he wasn't racist, but the whole thing gave me the ick. It didn't feel natural at all. But then he started reading his book to me. Like, seriously, he just whipped it out and started reading chapters aloud. I tried to laugh it off, thinking it was a one-time thing, but no, he kept reading. And not just a few paragraphs. No, this guy read to me for a solid 3 hours. That's right, 3 hours. I sat there stuck in this coffee shop with him reading me chapters about his character. This guy he'd written who was supposed to be this tough, street smart dude navigating the city. And the more he read, the weirder it got. The way he described the character was, I don't know how to put it. It felt like Toby was trying to prove something. Every detail he read sounded like he was using his character's experiences to justify how much he understood the struggles of people with different backgrounds. It was so over the top. Like, this guy had never actually lived what he was writing about, but somehow he thought that reading it aloud would make him sound deep and enlightened. It was honestly starting to get uncomfortable. I couldn't even look at him without feeling this weird tension in the air. The whole time I kept thinking, what the heck am I doing here? I wasn't sure how to politely stop him, but it felt rude to just get up and leave. I didn't want to hurt his feelings, and honestly, I didn't even know if he realized how awkward it was. He was so engrossed in his own reading that it felt like he didn't even notice how weird the situation had become. At one point, I tried checking my phone to make it look like I had somewhere to be, but he didn't pick up on any of my hints. He was just lost in his story, oblivious to the fact that I was practically dying inside. I tried to zone out and think about something else, but his voice just kept going on and on. The worst part was when he got to this part in the book where his character was confronting some bad guys in the streets. He described these people with such a weird level of detail. It felt like he was describing real people, almost like he was projecting some kind of bizarre fantasy of what he thought these people were like. The way he romanticized it, it made me uncomfortable. It was like this whole persona he created for himself through his book. He didn't just want to be a writer. He wanted to be seen as someone who was above the rest, someone who understood the struggles of people from different backgrounds, even if he didn't. It was hard to put into words, but the whole thing just felt fake. And I was sitting there wondering how the hell I'd gotten into this situation. 3 hours of hearing about a character I didn't care about, written by a guy who seemed more interested in telling me how much he got people than actually listening to me. Finally, when he finished reading, I made a quick excuse about needing to leave. I wasn't even sure how to process everything, but I knew I had to get out of there. I was feeling drained, and not in the wow, that was deep way. More like this guy just gave me a 3-hour lecture on how much he understands people. I don't even think I said much after he finished reading. I just grabbed my bag and stood up, mumbling something about having a busy day ahead as I left the coffee shop. The whole thing stuck with me for days after. I kept replaying the date in my head, trying to figure out if I was just being too sensitive or if it was actually as weird as it felt. But honestly, the more I thought about it, the more uncomfortable I became. There's something about a guy who's so obsessed with his own idea of being enlightened, especially when he's talking about other cultures, that feels off. It wasn't just about the book or the reading. It was about the fact that he was trying so hard to present himself as the guy who understands without actually showing any real depth or understanding. I haven't talked to Toby since. After that date, I just deleted his number and unfollowed him on social media. I don't know if he'll ever realize why I cut ties, but honestly, I didn't need to stick around to figure it out. I learned a lesson that day. Some people are just a little too invested in the idea of being good people, and it's not always as genuine as they think. I can't get that night out of my head. To be honest, it feels like something out of a nightmare, and I'm still wondering if it actually happened or if I just imagined it. Either way, I gotta tell somebody, so I guess it might as well be you. I met Amanda on Tinder like you do, right? I wasn't expecting anything crazy. I'd just been through a few weird dates that weren't worth mentioning, but she caught my eye because of her profile pic. She had this soft smile, kind of innocent, almost like she didn't belong in the world of online dating. She had her baby in her arms, which honestly threw me off. I don't know if that was intentional, but it felt like a hook. She didn't have the typical looking for a hookup vibe. She seemed, I don't know, more grounded. We chatted for a couple of days, nothing too wild. She told me she was a new mom and was adjusting to life with a baby. Totally cool, right? I wasn't going in thinking I was about to meet some weirdo, but after a few messages, she dropped a bomb. She told me she was child feeding, and sometimes it was hard to manage, especially when she was out. And I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really know how to respond to that. I just said something like, hey, no big deal, it must be tough. Anyway, I wasn't thinking much of it. I mean, people got weird stuff going on, right? Everyone's got their own thing. So we kept texting. Then one evening, she hit me up with a message asking if I wanted to meet up. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. What kind of idiot would say yes to a Tinder date with someone who's talking about chest feeding? Well, for whatever reason, I said yes. Something about her was different. Maybe I was just bored or curious, but I agreed to meet at a local coffee shop. She said she'd be there with her baby. No problem. I wasn't expecting anything strange. When I walked in, she was sitting by the window, the baby asleep in a stroller next to her. I almost didn't recognize her at first. The profile picture had been nice, but in person she was more edgy. She had dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't been sleeping much, which I guess makes sense if you got a newborn. But her energy, it wasn't what I expected. It felt kind of off, but I brushed it aside. I figured it was just the stress of motherhood. We talked for a while. Small talk about the baby, her new life, what I did. But then, out of nowhere, she started telling me how hard it was to get her baby on a good feeding schedule. How she had to pump all the time, or her milk would just spill out. Now, I wasn't exactly prepared for that kind of conversation, but it was a topic I could at least kind of keep up with, given what she'd shared already. It's just, the more she talked about it, the weirder things started to feel. Like, she was explaining things in such graphic detail, way more than you'd expect a stranger to talk about. It was like she was trying to convince me to be okay with it. I don't know, it just felt strange. And then she did something I wasn't ready for. Without warning, she started pulling down her top. I was stunned for a second. I mean, we were in public, and this wasn't the kind of thing I thought would happen. But there she was, adjusting herself like it was the most normal thing in the world, and the baby was still sleeping in the stroller. She said she needed to release some milk, and that it would make her feel better. Again, I wasn't sure how to handle it, but I thought, okay, whatever, maybe she's just super comfortable with herself. I didn't want to be rude. But then she looked at me with this weird smile. It was like she was daring me to say something. And I'm not kidding, she said, "You can have a taste if you want." I can't even explain the way I felt in that moment. There was this knot in my stomach, but also this overwhelming curiosity. I know it sounds messed up, but I wasn't sure if she was joking or serious. The way she said it, though, it didn't sound like a joke at all. It sounded like she was really offering. And I don't know what happened next. I froze. My mind was racing. I couldn't even look at her. I didn't know what to say. I just sat there staring at her, and all I could hear was the hum of the coffee shop around us. Nobody was paying attention, but it felt like everyone was. She kept smiling like it was totally normal. It was such an awkward silence. The baby, thank God, was still asleep. Finally, I just stood up. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I needed to get out of there. I didn't even say anything. I just grabbed my bag and walked out. My heart was pounding the entire time. I didn't text her after that. I blocked her, deleted her from everything. Honestly, I didn't know if I was going crazy or if something was seriously wrong with her, but I couldn't take the chance. I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't all there. Now, I still think about it from time to time. Like, what the hell was that? Was she just really that weird, or was there something deeper going on? I mean, how do you explain something like that? It wasn't just the fact that she offered me her natural human milk. It was the way she acted, like she expected me to go along with it, like it was no big deal. I haven't gone on any Tinder dates since that night. Honestly, I don't think I could after that. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust the app again, or people for that matter. Maybe she was just trying to find someone who understood her situation, but that wasn't it. That was something else entirely. Okay, I have to get this off my chest because I still don't know if I'm losing my mind or if this guy was genuinely messed up. This whole thing happened a few months ago, but every time I think about it, I feel the same weird mix of confusion and discomfort. I met this guy on Tinder. His name was John. He seemed normal at first, nothing unusual in his profile. He wasn't dropping any red flags, but looking back, it's like I missed 100 of them. I should have swiped left, but I didn't. It all started with our first conversation. We exchanged a few messages, the usual small talk. Nothing weird or alarming. He seemed polite enough, even funny, a little dry humor, but nothing that made me think he was strange. I didn't expect to meet anyone super interesting right off the bat. But then he asked if I wanted to meet in person. I agreed, thinking, why not? It's just coffee, right? We decided to meet at this local cafe. It was one of those chill spots with big windows and comfy chairs. I showed a little early, grabbed a seat by the window, and waited. He was supposed to be there around 2 p.m., but I didn't mind the wait. I scrolled through my phone, killing time. Then, at 2:05, you walked in, and that's when I started to feel that weird vibe, but I couldn't quite place it at first. He wasn't exactly what I expected. I don't know what I had imagined, but John looked off. He was taller than I thought, a bit more scruffy, like he hadn't shaved in a few days, but nothing extreme. His clothes were normal, a hoodie and jeans. He smiled when he saw me, and I waved him over. We exchanged a few pleasantries, nothing out of the ordinary. He sat down, and we started talking about work, hobbies, what we like to do for fun, the usual. But then things started to take this weird turn. For some reason, every time I said something, he would repeat it, like word for word. At first, I thought he was just joking around or maybe being sarcastic, trying to be funny, but after a while, I realized that wasn't it. He wasn't laughing, wasn't smirking. He just kept repeating everything I said. It was like I was talking to a mirror. If I said, I love movies, he'd say, you love movies. If I said, I just started a new job, he'd say, you just started a new job. It was getting uncomfortable. I was sitting there getting more and more confused. I tried changing it up, saying something random, but he'd still do it. I'm really into hiking, I'd say. You're really into hiking, he'd reply. At first, I thought maybe he was making some weird social joke that I wasn't getting. I mean, we were just getting to know each other, so I figured he might be one of those people who thought they were hilarious when in reality they weren't. I tried to laugh it off, but it was starting to get awkward. I changed the topic, tried talking about something else, but he'd keep repeating. It was like I was stuck in a loop. The more I thought about it, the more uncomfortable I got. I don't even know how much time passed, but at some point, I started to feel like I was trapped in some weird game. Like he was doing this intentionally, but I couldn't figure out why. After about 20 minutes of this, I couldn't take it anymore. I made an excuse about needing to leave, said I had an early day tomorrow, and stood up. He just watched me go, repeating the words I said as I walked out the door. I didn't text him after that. I didn't block him or anything, but I was definitely done. I figured I'd never hear from him again, and I was okay with that. The next day, I had a message from him. It was just a simple, hey, I'm sorry if I was weird yesterday. I'm socially awkward and didn't know what else to say. I was floored. Socially awkward. That's what he thought was socially awkward. He was literally mimicking everything I said like I was some sort of puppet. It wasn't awkward in a, oh, I'm shy way. It was like something deeper was going on, and I didn't know how to react. I didn't know if I should be mad, confused, or just feel bad for him. I responded with something like, yeah, that was really strange. I didn't get what was happening, honestly. I was trying to keep it light, not make it too confrontational. But inside, I was like, what the hell was that? But then he hit me with something that made my stomach turn. He said, honestly, I get nervous talking to people. And I thought if I repeated what you said, maybe it would make me feel less awkward. Like, I didn't know how to keep the conversation going. I'm sorry if it was too much. I just didn't know what else to do. I stared at the message for a while. I didn't know how to respond. Was this guy really so socially anxious that he just had no idea how to have a normal conversation? And if that was the case, why would he think repeating everything I said would somehow help? It didn't make any sense. It felt like he was trying to cover something up, like he wasn't being totally honest about why he was doing it. I didn't text him back. Part of me wanted to tell him how messed up it was, how uncomfortable it made me, but I just couldn't. I don't know why. Maybe I felt bad for him. Maybe I just wanted to pretend it never happened and move on. It's been a few months since then, and I still can't stop thinking about it. I'm not sure what was going on with John. Maybe he really was just socially awkward, but that was something way beyond awkward. It felt like he was trapped in his own weird headspace. I don't know if I'll ever really understand it, but I can tell you this much. I'm not giving Tinder another shot anytime soon. All right, I've got a story for you. This happened last year, and I've been trying to block it out ever since, but it keeps popping into my head. I met this girl on Tinder, and I don't even know where to start, but here it goes. I thought I was just meeting a nice girl. You know, someone you vibe with and could maybe go somewhere with. I had no idea I was about to be wrapped up in the most bizarre situation of my life. Her name was Hannah. She wasn't like the other girls I'd met on there. She wasn't playing the usual, I'm so hot, look at me game. Her profile was different. She was pretty, but in a laid-back kind of way. She had a few pictures of her just hanging out with friends, not trying too hard. And there was one with her at a park, standing next to a big tree, smiling with no makeup on. It felt real. So I swiped right, and we started talking. Conversations were chilled, just getting to know each other, you know. No weird vibes at first. I was into her. A couple weeks later, we decided to meet in person. She suggested a local diner. It wasn't fancy, but I liked the vibe. When I showed up, I saw her right away sitting at a booth. I walked over, said, hey, and sat down. She smiled, but there was something strange about her. She had this big belly, and I'm not talking about a little food baby or a slight bump. This was a full-on pregnant belly, and it kind of threw me off. I wasn't sure how to react at first. I mean, I've never been in that situation before. I wasn't sure if I should ask about it or what. I tried to keep the conversation flowing, but I was awkward, trying to ignore the fact that she was clearly pregnant. Finally, after a few minutes of chatting, I couldn't help myself and asked her, "So, how far along are you?" I thought it was a normal question. Can you know someone? And I figured it was safe to ask. She kind of froze for a second, then looked at me all serious. She said nothing for a bit, and I could tell something was off. Then she snapped out with a tone I didn't expect. "I'm not pregnant," she said, staring at me like I just insulted her. I sat there, dumbfounded, because I had no idea how to respond. I thought it made an innocent comment. But the more I thought about it, I started to feel like maybe I had messed up somehow. She was still glaring at me. She leaned forward and said something I'll never forget. "This is what a real woman looks like. Do you have a problem with it?" Her tone was sharp, like she was daring me to say something. My brain was trying to process what was happening. She wasn't pregnant, but that belly? I was confused. I apologized, stumbling over my words and tried to change the subject. But she didn't seem to want to let it go. She spent the rest of the night talking about body positivity and how she wasn't ashamed of her body, even though she was bigger than the average woman. I wasn't sure if she was being defensive because she was self-conscious or if she genuinely wanted to argue about it. We finished the meal and I didn't know what to think. I felt uncomfortable, but I didn't want to be rude. I walked her to her car and she seemed fine by the time we got there, but the whole real woman speech still echoed in my head. Over the next couple of months, we kept hanging out. It was like nothing weird had ever happened. We'd go to movies, grab drinks, talk about our lives. But her belly, God, it kept getting bigger. I didn't want to ask her about it again. I figured maybe she had some medical condition or something I didn't understand. I don't know, maybe I was too nice, or maybe I just didn't want to admit I was in over my head. She started getting more distant too. Not in a way that was obvious, but it was like she wasn't as talkative anymore. She mentioned things like God's plan and the miracle of life randomly, which I thought was strange. I figured she was just religious, so I let slide. But the belly, man, it just kept growing. Then one night she called me out of nowhere. She sounded excited, like she had something big to tell me. I didn't know what to expect. Maybe she was going to tell me something about her life or something that would make sense of all the weirdness lately. But when I showed up at her apartment, everything got way stranger. She was pacing in the living room, and when I walked in, she just turned and smiled at me like everything was normal. But her belly had grown even more. I don't know how to explain it, but it was like it didn't even look real anymore. It wasn't just swollen, it was huge, and I couldn't understand how it could grow that much in such a short period. She looked at me and said, "It's time. It's happening." I was frozen in place. I didn't know what she meant. Was she going into labor? Was she finally going to explain what was going on? But before I could say anything, she looked at me like she was seeing something spiritual and said, "It's a miracle. Jesus has blessed me with a child. He's bringing it into the world through me." I thought she was talking nonsense at first, but she kept repeating it like she truly believed it. Her face was glowing with excitement, like she had been waiting for this moment her entire life. And then it happened. Right in front of me, as weird as it sounds, she asterisk gave birth asterisk right there in her living room. I don't even know how to describe it. There was no hospital, no doctor, just her a lot of weird, unnatural energy in the room. She had a baby. I can't explain it, but I saw it with my own eyes. After it happened, she was holding this tiny, crying baby in her arms, and she looked at me with the most serene expression I've ever seen. She called it a miracle from Jesus. I didn't know what to say or do. I was completely stunned. I never went back after that night. I just left. She texted me a couple of times after, but I didn't respond. I couldn't. I don't know if it was some kind of weird scam or if she really thought what she said was true. But whatever it was, I was out of my depth, and I wasn't sticking around to figure it out. I'll never forget that night, though, and I'm never going back on Tinder again. Some things are just too strange to explain. I met this guy named Jake on Tinder. We matched one random evening when I was just scrolling through, swiping right on people who seemed cool enough. His profile didn't stand out in any weird way. He was just your typical guy, with a few decent pictures and a bio that seemed like he was into the usual stuff. Sports, hanging out with friends, playing video games, all that. We started chatting, and it was pretty normal at first. The kind of casual conversations you expect when you're just getting to know someone. But honestly, the more we talked, the more he seemed like the type of guy who was super into talking, like he could go on and on about whatever. I didn't mind it at first. It was easy to chat with him, and he'd always ask me questions about myself, which I thought was nice. He seemed interested. But the more we talked, the more I started feeling like he was a little too eager. It wasn't obvious at first, but when I replied with something simple, he'd keep pushing for more details. It started getting a bit weird, but I brushed it off. We decided to meet up a couple of weeks later at a local coffee shop. Nothing fancy, just a quick meet and greet. I didn't really know what to expect, but when I saw him in person, I wasn't expecting what happened next. Jake was fine. Nothing too out of the ordinary, but something about his vibe was off. He was too intense, like he was staring at me a little too long when I talked, hanging in every word like I was saying something super important. I thought it was just nerves, but after a while, I realized it was more than that. Our conversation was okay. We went through the usual topics, but I noticed that he kept asking really personal questions. It wasn't like he was asking if I was into certain things or what kind of music I liked. No, it was stuff like, do you always hang out at this place? Or what time do you normally leave work? Like little things that seemed off, but at the same time, I didn't want to make a scene. The night ended without anything crazy happening, and I thought, okay, I'm just overthinking it. So I gave him a chance to message me again, and we started talking more. Everything seemed normal at first, but I started noticing little things. Like when I posted something on Instagram or went to a new place, he'd suddenly be like, oh, I saw that on your story. Or if I went to a cafe he'd never been to, he'd message me saying something like, that place is amazing, I love their pastries. It was starting to feel like he was watching me more than I realized. But again, I figured I was just paranoid. Things started escalating after that. A few days later, I was sitting at a park with a friend when I saw Jake walking by. I hadn't told him I'd be there, and I definitely hadn't posted anything about going to the park. I thought it was just a coincidence, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't. I didn't say anything, but I couldn't help but notice he kept glancing over at me as he walked past. It wasn't like a casual look. It felt more like he was making sure I was there. I decided to keep it cool, thinking it was just in my head. The next day, things got weirder. Jake started sending me messages that were more intense. Not in a romantic way, but like he was obsessed with my schedule. He would send texts about my work hours, what time I usually get off, and where I'd go afterward. I felt so uncomfortable, like he was tracking me. I didn't want to make a big deal about it, so I just didn't respond. The thing is, he didn't let up. He'd text me every single day, multiple times a day. It started getting exhausting, trying to dodge his messages without being rude, but eventually I just told him I was busy and couldn't talk as much. That's when things went from uncomfortable to straight up disturbing. One night, I was hanging out with some friends at a bar. It wasn't the usual place I go, but I had just moved to the area, and I thought it'd be cool to check out something new. As I was standing by the bar, I heard someone call my name. I turned around, and there he was, Jake. He was standing there like it was the most normal thing in the world. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't told him I was going out. In fact, I hadn't posted anything on social media about being at that bar. I felt my heart race a little. How did he know? He seemed super calm, but the way he was acting just made my stomach drop. He was asking about my friends, about how long I've been living in the area, how I liked the place. It was like he knew everything about me I had never even told him. He kept standing there, not letting me get a word in. I felt trapped. So I did what I thought was best and excused myself. When I left the bar that night, I checked my phone, and sure enough, there was a message from Jake. You left a little early tonight. Was it something I said? I blocked him right after that. I couldn't take it anymore. But that didn't stop him. Over the next few weeks, I kept getting random messages from different accounts. That were all from him, but he kept making fake profiles. He'd even go as far as pretending to be one of my friends, asking how I was doing, then slowly slipping in questions about my life, where I'd been, who I was with when I'd be home. It went on like this for weeks. I couldn't escape. I started feeling like I was being watched 24/7. It was like I couldn't breathe without him knowing where I was. I didn't know how to make it stop, but I didn't feel safe anymore. I eventually had to take the extreme step of changing my phone number, deleting every social media account, and going as far as moving to a new place. I blocked every single account he made, but somehow he always found a way to contact me. I still don't know how he did it, or what was going through his head. It's been a while since all of that, and I haven't heard from him in months. But sometimes I still get that feeling that someone is watching me, and I'll never forget how something as simple as Tinder turned into something so terrifying.
Thanks for making it to the end. Subscribe to Wide Awake Horror. Please like and share.